So what we're doing today is looking at sentence fragments and run-on sentences. So, we've been talking a lot about, what you need in a sentence, what makes a complete sentence. We've been doing that, subject and verb at the very, very least, right? You need a subject and a verb for those super simple sentences. Joe slept. And then, you get more advanced ideas. Joe slept until 9, right? That gives you more information. But at the very least, you have to have that subject and verb. So the thing about, a sentence fragment, you either don't have everything you need for a sentence, or you have changed the way the subject and verb works. So you can have a sentence fragment with a subject and verb that otherwise would be a complete sentence. But if you add a subordinating word, you're not going to get it. You change it. So Joe slept, right? For example, we know what Joe did, complete sentence. If I say after Joe slept, suddenly that's not a complete sentence because Joe slept. You've changed it, right? It's no longer a complete sentence. And then on the flip side of that, run-on sentence. So a run-on sentence is when you have too many ideas going on and you don't have the right punctuation or a joining word to separate those ideas. So we'll be dealing with both of those. So again, this is kind of what we've been leading to here, talking about this both on the reading side and on the language mechanics side, because subject and verbs, been dealing a lot with those. How do you make a complete sentence? Now we're going to address, not just identifying them, but how are you going to fix them once you encounter them? So let's take a look at our lesson. Everything is slow today. Okay.
Oh, hey there. This lesson is all about fragments and run-ons. In this lesson, how you can find and fix fragments and run-ons. Fragments and run-ons always caused a problem for me. I never paid too much attention to when a sentence began or ended. I just wrote it all down. And that made my writing hard to read, especially when I was applying to a job and I turned in the job application. The manager met with me right away, but when he started reading through my application, he just told me, "Sorry, no go." I asked what was wrong, and he told me that they need someone who can communicate in writing. I got sort of defensive, but he pointed out this answer on my job application that was all one long sentence. "I can't send something like that to a client," he said. "It's impossible to read because all the ideas run into each other." Well, at least run-on sentences never stopped me from delivering pizzas. But I want to do better than that, so I figured I'd better learn about sentence structure. Here, let me show you what I know.
Yeah, so, right, fragments, not enough information. Run-on sentence, too much information. You need to split it up somehow to make it easier to read. So we'll learn how that all works.
Okay, before anything else, you need to understand what a clause is. You know that a sentence has to have a subject and a verb, right? Well, a group of words that has a subject and a verb is called a clause. A simple sentence is just one clause like this: Curtis watched the game. The subject is Curtis, and the verb is watched. A clause could have more than one subject, like Curtis and Dwayne watched the game. It can have more than one verb, too, like this: Curtis and Dwayne watched the game, ate chips, and talked about sports. No matter how many subjects and verbs it has, the basic clause in a sentence is called an independent or main clause. And every sentence needs one. A sentence can have more than one clause, though. You might have two independent clauses joined together, like this: Curtis finished his work, but Dwayne played a game. Each independent clause could stand on its own as a sentence, but you can join independent clauses with a conjunction: for, and, nor, but, or, yet, or so. I remember them by calling them fanboys' words. Now, there's another kind of clause that's not independent, a dependent or subordinate clause. That's a clause that you add on to a sentence to explain why, who, what, when, where, or how. It's like an independent clause because it has a subject and a verb, but it starts with a subordinating conjunction that explains the relationship between the subordinate clause and the independent clause. Those are words like because, since, or although. There's a list of subordinating conjunctions in the resources. A subordinate clause always needs an independent clause. It can't stand on its own. Here's an example. Curtis left because Dwayne was being annoying. The independent clause is Curtis left. The subordinate clause is because Dwayne was being annoying. The subordinate clause can also go at the beginning, like this. After Curtis left, Dwayne was lonely. The subordinate clause is after Curtis left, and the independent clause is Dwayne was lonely. Do you think you understand the two types of clauses?
Yeah, so this is, of course, where you run into trouble. Just like it says, just like I mentioned, you can have a subject and a verb that would otherwise be a complete sentence, but you use one of those subordinate. We're going to look at the subordinate conjunctions, and you'll see, right? And here's the same thing, right? After Curtis left, not a whole idea. You can also see those as introductory phrases sometimes. Before the game, comma, we went out for pizza, right? Before the game, doesn't have any information there. It's basically a prepositional phrase. You have a preposition. When did something happen? So introductory phrases and words also, you'll set off with a comma a lot of times, but particularly here because of these clauses, right? Typically they have a subject and a verb, but one is going to be a completely, complete thought. It's independent. The other would be subordinating. And let's learn a little more here. All right. Let's see. Nautica. I'm going to give this a try. So which here is a subordinate clause?
Hang on, let me read them.
Go ahead.
Report was due of 31st.
Counting into the floor after my and this department gave the report. What is a subordinate clause again? Like I was paying attention, but it would went past a little bit.
I'm sorry, like what the subordinate clause is?
Yeah.
Yeah, a subordinate clause means that it is not a complete sentence. It requires an independent clause to make it a complete sentence.
Okay. Is it the
I'll give you some help.
Is it after lunch the sales department gave her a presentation?
It's the second one there. After the marketing department finished planning the campaign.
Okay.
Okay. So I'll give you a couple, tips here to help you guys to identify a subordinate clause. One way to look at a subordinate clause, if you just have a subordinate clause, it leaves you hanging, right? So if you look at those and the rest there, right, you have complete sentences. So in B, right, our section there, it says, after the marketing department finished planning the campaign. At what, right? There's nothing else there. You have when it happened, right? But now you look at that first sentence. After lunch, the sales department gave a presentation. So sales department, okay, right? That's your subject. Gave a presentation. Gave is your is your verb, and then a presentation, right? That's the rest of that predicate. So after lunch is a subordinate clause happening right there at the beginning, right? If you just saw after lunch, same idea as in the second sentence. Well, what? What happened? So that's the way to look for it. It can't, if they're giving you if they're telling you it's a complete sentence, right? That's the thing. You have what they're telling you is that's a complete sentence. Is it telling you anything? Are you actually deriving any information from it? No. All it's telling you is when something happened, right? After the marketing department finished planning the campaign. After the marketing department finished planning the campaign, comma, they went to lunch, right? Or something like that. And then, of course, there's other two examples at the bottom, just your run-the-mill complete sentence, right? Jonathan, that's your subject, went. That's your verb, to the store after work. So that completes the sentence. That's the whole predicate there, telling you, where he went, what he did, or at what time. The report was due after the first of the year, right? So the report, due, that's your verb. When was it due? After the first of the year. But that second one, right? Not enough information, not a complete idea there. So that's your difference, right? Independent clause, complete idea. Subordinate clause needs more information.
Okay, now let's talk about fragments. A fragment is just a sentence. It's got a capital letter and a period or question mark.
Right. Just like that subordinate clause we just looked at.
Either a subject, a verb, or a complete thought. Fragments are a really common error in writing. Sometimes novelists and creative writers will use fragments on purpose to make something stand out, like this. Renee wouldn't stand for being treated like that. Not at work. Now, not at work isn't a complete sentence. It doesn't have a subject or a verb. It doesn't tell you a complete thought by itself. But the writer, it emphasizes that not at work is pretty important. But in your formal writing, you don't want to have fragments. Do you notice how not at work is really part of the thought in the other sentence? Well, a lot of fragments are like that. It's really common for a fragment to be a dependent clause that's been chopped off another sentence. Jeremy didn't like to visit his grandmother because she always pinched his cheeks. Because she always pinched his cheeks is a subordinate clause. It has a subject and a verb, but the word because makes it missing a complete
right.
thought.
So again, we have a list of subordinate conjunctions we're going to look at, but perfect example again, because she always pinched his cheeks. It's a subordinate phrase. And, typically with those subordinate clauses, if you remove the subordinate conjunction, you have a complete sentence, right? You have everything else you need. She always pinched his cheeks. That's a complete sentence. You change the meaning and you change the way it's working in your sentence when you add because. So you need a different subject and verb. In this case, it's going to be Jeremy didn't like to visit his grandmother.
Stand on its own, and it really should be part of the first sentence like this. Jeremy didn't like to visit his grandmother because she always pinched his cheeks. Here's some other fragments. You'll notice that they are all really part of it. It was always tiring. I love to go camping, especially in the winter. Megan ran every day and swam on the weekends. Ray enjoyed jazz, an art form that began in New Orleans. The first fragment is a noun that's made from a verb. The second one is an example. The third one is a second verb. And the last one is a description. You can fix all these incomplete sentences by attaching them to the rest of the idea where they belong. I love to go camping, especially in the winter. Megan ran every day and swam on the weekends. Ray enjoyed jazz, an art form that began in New Orleans. So, do you have a pretty good idea about how to find and fix fragments?
Right. And so, sometimes it's just a matter of, removing the period and adding perhaps a comma or and, it just depends. So like that second sentence, I love to go camping, comma, especially in the winter, right? So that's all they did was just remove the period, add the comma, and you now have a complete sentence out of those two. The second one, the third one, Megan ran every day and swam on the weekends, right? So there, you have basically the and, it's not separating two independent clauses, right? Because that's one way we can make a compound sentence. Megan ran every day and swam on the weekend. So we just put and in that situation. And Ray enjoyed jazz. So sort of like the second one there. Ray enjoyed jazz, an art form that began in New Orleans. A lot of times that's all it is. It's just switching the punctuation and or adding and. Sometimes it may involve rewording a little bit.
Which correction should you make to these sentences?
All right. So Mariama, I want to ask you here. So what correction do we need to make to this sentence?
Sometimes enjoy the trees also. I think it's B.
No change?
Yeah.
So it's A. It's sometimes the way these look, it's kind of confusing, right? What they're asking you to do.
Yeah.
But here, right, we're just changing, we're removing that period, right? Because Raquel often went to the park for lunch. That's a complete idea. To have some time alone, right? Not a complete idea. And then she enjoyed the trees, birds, and squirrels. Complete idea, right? She is subject, enjoyed is our verb, the trees, birds, and squirrels is the rest of the predicate. So we know to have some time alone, we need to put that somewhere with another sentence. It needs a independent clause, right? Because that is a dependent clause the way it stands. So Raquel often went to the park for lunch. To have some time alone, right? Remove the period, add to have some time alone to that beginning sentence.
Great job! The first sentence should read, Raquel often went to the park for lunch to have some time alone. The phrase, to have some time alone, doesn't have a subject and verb, so it can't stand alone. It describes why Raquel went to the park.
All right, moving along here.
Run-ons are kind of like the opposite of fragments. Fragments don't have enough information, and run-ons have too much information. Here are some types of run-ons. Sometimes a run-on sentence is just too long and confusing, and you need to make it shorter. But there are some run-ons that are just wrong grammar. One kind of run-on has more than two independent clauses, like this. Curtis went to the store and Maria started cooking dinner, but Dwayne was still playing his video game. That's three independent clauses joined together. An easy way to fix this is to break it up into two sentences. Curtis went to the store and Maria started cooking dinner. Dwayne was still playing his video game, though. Another common problem is called a comma splice. That's when you join two sentences with just a comma. Savannah, Georgia was settled in 1733. 100 colonists arrived on a ship called the Anne. You could fix a comma splice in four ways. First, you could just make it into two sentences. Savannah, Georgia was settled in 1733. 100 colonists arrived on a ship called the Anne. Or you could use a semicolon. Savannah, Georgia was settled in 1733. 100 colonists arrived on a ship called the Anne. The third way is to use one of the fan voice words to join independent clauses. Savannah, Georgia was settled in 1733, and 100 colonists arrived on a ship called the Anne. That doesn't make a very good connection between the two sentences, though. The fourth way is probably better for this sentence. Make one of the sentences into a subordinate clause. Savannah, Georgia was settled in 1733 when 100 colonists arrived on a ship called the Anne. That makes a better connection between the two ideas. That's what subordinating conjunctions do. They show a relationship. One of the things that causes comma splices are adverbs that introduce a new sentence because they can sound like conjunctions, but they're not. You can't.
We haven't really talked about adverbs that much, but adverb is a word that describes a verb, right? He quickly ran, right? Quickly is an adverb, whereas adjectives, right, describe nouns.
Them to join sentences. I call them not a conjunctions. Here are some of the common not a conjunctions. Then, however, consequently, therefore, thus, subsequently, otherwise, nevertheless, further, likewise, finally, furthermore, also, and moreover. If you see these words joining two sentences, it's a run-on, like this. Jason went to the store, then he met Carol. But you can use one of the 4 methods to fix it. Jason went to the store, and then he met Carol. Do you get the idea of run-on sentences?
Yeah, that one is a real problem. So, you know, we'll have a list of actual conjunctions, right? They're typically like, I don't know why he calls them fanboy, you know, words, but they're very simple usually, you know, and, but, yet, right? So those, you just throw your comma in there, you add it, and then you finish your sentence, right? For joining two independent clauses. With those lists, and we'll look at a list here in a minute of like subordinated conjunctions and those adverbs, right? Special cases where, you know, how you would use them to join a sentence. They're not really joining the sentence. It's the punctuation that's used that's joining the sentence. You know, I wanted to go to the park. However, Emma wanted to go to the movies, right? However, in that case is showing contrast between the two ideas. But to link those two ideas, I have to put, I wanted to go to the park, semicolon, however, comma, Emma wanted to go to the movies, okay? You can move phrases like however, nevertheless around in a sentence a little bit, and that would change where you use punctuation. If it's at the beginning of a sentence before a complete independent clause, right? It's sort of like an interrupting phrase. So you just use commas. So, you know, Emma wanted to go to the movies. I, however, wanted to go to the park. So I, comma, however, comma, wanted to go to the park. And then there's just using a contrasting conjunction like but, and you don't have to worry about it. So I wanted to go to the park, comma, but Emma wanted to go to the movies. So that's a lot to take in, but it's basically knowing the difference between, you know, a real conjunction to combine two independent clauses, or words like therefore, nevertheless, furthermore, moreover, which are adverbs.
Sentence is a run-on.
All right, run-on sentence here. So, Kate, how about we go to you? Which one is a run-on sentence?
You can, I would say A.
You're saying A?
Yeah.
Yeah, good job, right? So just the rule we just talked about. Bill was late, however, he didn't miss the meeting. The punctuation here is what's basically causing the issue, making it a run-on. Just like I said, if you wanted to use however to separate that into a sentence, Bill was late, semicolon, however, comma, he didn't miss the meeting. Or Bill was late, comma, but he didn't miss the meeting. That's a lot simpler, right? If you just use a conjunction. How else could you do it? You could actually make that into two simple sentences. You could say Bill was late, period, because that's a simple sentence. Nevertheless, comma, he didn't miss the meeting, right? He didn't miss the meeting. Also a complete sentence, right? That's the idea there. You're combining two independent clauses, making a compound sentence. And like it says here, the thing that you want to avoid with run-ons is limiting your number of independent clauses, right? You want two, you don't want more than two, because then that gets real messy. And then you need either a conjunction with a comma, or if you're using like an adverb, a semicolon, and then a comma after that word. To keep it simple, just stick with the conjunctions. That way, you'll always be right. All right, and then before we take a look at the lesson, well, the quiz.
Cool.
And
Nice job working back.
Dwayne, real quick here. So subordinating conjunctions, right? What we were just talking about. When you see those, you need to, you're looking at a subordinate clause. So recognizing those will really help. And just like I said, right after I go to the store, comma, I'll go home. I won't go through the whole list here. I'll just point out a few, right? Just like I said before, after I go to the store, not a complete idea, right? You're just hanging out there waiting for, somebody's telling you that, there's more information. Nobody has told you anything other than the fact of what time and place this event happened, right? After I go to the store, comma, I'll go home. As you read, right? Certainly, right? If you saw that standing alone, that's a subordinate clause. It's the same thing, right? So there's certain words like after, as, before, by the time, every time, right? By the time you're finished, it will be dinner time. And this, it gets complicated because it's not, a lot of times we don't always talk in complete sentences, especially if somebody else knows the context, in conversation. So if I, got to go pick up my daughter after class at Girl Scout camp. So if my wife asks me, when are you picking up Emma? I would reply with after I finish class. That's not a complete sentence, right? But it would be awkward if I said, if my wife asked me, when are you picking up Emma? And I said, after class, I will pick up Emma. Right? It's just doesn't really work in conversation. So that's where we have to be careful with things like this. So, rest of the list, it's the same idea there. When you see those words, right? A lot of times they're prepositions, but a lot of times what they're doing one way or the other, they're locating time and place. They're locating the time something happened, the place something happened, or maybe both. There's also some cause and effect a lot of times, which we'll talk about as well, but like it says, time and when. Not a complete sentence without a independent clause. Contrast, right? Same thing. Although I'm tired, it's not a complete idea. If you see the word although, you know that you're going to need a independent clause along with a subordinate clause. Although I'm tired, comma, I need to study. Even, right? Although, even, though, whereas, those are adding contrast to the idea, right? Contrast is I'm tired, but I need to study. That's the contrast though. Even when you're upset, contrast, I like you. Even when you're upset, I like you. Way and how. So again, much like time and when, or time and place, as if, as though, right? Read the poem as if you mean it. Right. So if I just said as if you mean it, not a complete sentence. As though you're mad, not a complete sentence. So read the poem as if you mean it. Read the poem as though you're mad. Amounts. right? As much as I like cake. Not a complete sentence. I like pie more. That's a complete sentence. In this case, even though I like pie more is a complete sentence, right? It doesn't make a lot of sense without that subordinate clause. And then reasons why, right? So sort of your cause and effect ideas, right? Because, right? Because I like oranges, I'll buy extra. Or, you could say, I'll buy extra oranges, comma, because I like them, right? You can switch around the order of things there. In case, right? Buy some milk in case we want it later. Again, in case we want it later, not a complete idea. And you can see, same thing for all of these. Since is one that you'll see a lot, because or since, in case of, in case, I don't care why you are leaving, right? Why? Not always, starting a question. It could be in the middle of a sentence. Conditionally, if, then, those types of statements. If only Stephen were taller, he could reach the shelf. So you can start to see the idea here, right? When you see these words, subordinate clause. These are subordinate clause words. Comparisons, just as, or than, right? We'll talk a lot more about some of those frequently confused words. Then and than get confused a lot, right? Then is about time or place. Than, right, is comparing. Just like in math, greater than, less than. So she is taller than her father. Than her father is. So she is taller than, not a complete sentence. Than her father is, not a complete sentence. Put them both together with that subordinate conjunction, you have a complete sentence. Same thing, what, so that, what, or which. Frank wants to know which TV is broken. She wants to know what the report is about. She wants to know that the report is finished. Location, again, where, when, anytime you see those, it's going to be subordinate clauses. Pauline will go where the meeting is, and then who or whoever, right? So if you're addressing people, so I don't care who you are, or Renee wants to meet whoever is in charge. So, largely what you're doing here, right, is just asking, A, do I have a complete thought? Is there something missing? Right, that's for fragments. If you're identifying a fragment, you ask yourself, do I have a complete thought there? Is there a subject and verb? Is it independent of anything else? Will it stand alone as a sentence? Run-on sentences, I think we got a little more information here. So, right, as it says, a complete sentence is an independent clause. He writes music is the example there, right? A complete sentence has minimally two parts. Keep mentioning this: a subject and a verb. Most sentences you're going to see, must express some complete thought, whether it's two words or you're adding information. So let's see here. Few sentences, right? Few sentences consist of two independent clauses, nothing separating them, right? But both the comma and coordinating conjunction are missing. So just one gross, long, sentence. And here they actually have a shorter sentence that they've smashed together. She writes the music, he plays the guitar. You got to have a conjunction in between that. It's not going to work otherwise. She writes the music, comma, and he plays the guitar. Let's see. So, like they say in here, how are you going to break those up? What's your strategy? Like I said, you could use a conjunction depending on what what's happening between the two. In this case, it just seems like she's playing guitar, or she writes music, he plays guitar. Separate independent clauses with periods, so two short sentences. That's another route. She writes the music, period, he plays the guitar. The semicolon, as I've mentioned, basically replaces the word and replaces the comma and the word and. So you could just do that. And then link ideas using a subordinate clause. So she writes the music for Coldplay, comma, he plays the guitar for the band. So as you see here, the subordinate clause then becomes she writes the music for Coldplay, and comma, he plays the guitar for the band. That's the independent clause. All right. Comma splices, right, are when you don't have a complete sentence, or well, when you're only trying to fuse a sentence with a comma and you still have two independent clauses. And again, right, their idea there, she writes the music for Coldplay, but he plays the guitar for the band. That's correct sentence. Incorrect up here at the top. Example of a comma splice. She writes the music, he plays the guitar. Gotta have a conjunction there. Can't just have punctuation unless it's a semicolon. That's the only punctuation that would work in that situation. Punctuation situation, that rhymes. So again, yeah, that's a comma splice. And I'll put this on Google Classroom, and I think they have a little bit of practice there for avoiding run-ons. So there is your two supplements. And now on to our practice questions. So I will give you guys a few minutes here. Let's go for 10 minutes. Might not be as long because there's going to be less reading. So let's go for 10 minutes and see if we can work through identify run-on and fragments and see if we can get them corrected. And this assignment should be in language arts or math language arts or RLA language, however it comes up on your list there. Okay, I'll give you guys about 2 more minutes here. We'll jump back in and take a look. Okay, so let's take a look here at lesson. We'll work through the questions here. Everything is moving really slow today, causing a lot of lag in networks.
Oh, hey there.
Question
This
one.
lesson is all about fragments.
Shut that. All right, so you know, subordinate clause in the sentence, right? That's the first thing it was asking us. I need a watch because my watch is broken. So looking for a subordinate clause, we're looking for that subordinate conjunction. Because, right? We do not have a complete sentence after that. So our subordinate clause in that case is because my watch is broken, right? Just like we said, if I said that, that's not a complete idea. Something else needs to be attached to that somehow, some way. In this case, I need a new watch. Okay, and then the correction we need to make. So when if you're you know, if you're faced with one of these types of questions, right? We have multiple sentences here. So let's see where we have complete ideas, where we have independent clauses making a complete sentence, and where do we not? That's the first rule there. So the windows need to be closed. Okay, that's a complete idea. Whenever it is cold outside, does that stand alone as a sentence? No. We don't want to waste money trying to heat the outdoors. Also a complete sentence. So whenever, right, that's another one of those words we talked about. Whenever it is cold outside, it doesn't work as a standalone sentence. It makes much more sense to add that to that first sentence, and then we'll look at our options of how we're going to do that. So that's going to probably leave us like with 2 options, right? So, you know, looking here, we have 2 options that deal with whenever. So how do we change it? This first option, that's a no-go, right? Because that's got a colon there, which would separate out, you know, information into a list or something like that. So let's just remove the period and make that, add that to our independent clause. Right? So whenever it is cold outside is a fragment, it's a subordinate clause, and explains why the windows need to be closed. So it should be part of the previous sentence. Right? Here's another one of those long ones. So we read through it, right? We got a run on here. We got too much going on. Alex's friend chose an expensive hotel, but Alex wanted to stay within his budget. Alex decided to stay in a cheaper hotel nearby. We need to split those up because it's just there's too many independent clauses. Well, what would work? So we can, kind of work through it before we look at our choices. Alex's friends chose an expensive hotel, but Alex wanted to stay within his budget. That all seems to make sense. Do we have a independent clause though in the next part? Alex decided to stay in a cheaper hotel nearby. So there, yeah, we have another independent clause. That makes a whole sentence. That's a complete idea. Alex decided to stay in a cheaper hotel nearby. Alex is subject, decided is our verb, to stay in a cheaper hotel nearby. That's our predicate. So we know what to do. We look and see what changes we're going to make here. So we're not going to remove a comma. We need to make Alex decided to stay in a cheaper hotel nearby its own sentence. And that's going to leave this choice down here, right? So we take away the comma and we add a period. All right, and then what we got next?
Good job. You got 3 in a row correct.
Right, so asking us how many clauses are in this sentence. John and Eric were supposed to be at the party 2 hours ago, but their car had a flat tire. So if this is a correct sentence, which is what it's asking us, right? It's not giving us a sentence we need to correct. It's asking us how many clauses are in this sentence. So we can look right there where it's split by the comma and the conjunction but, right? So their car had a flat tire. That's a complete idea, right? We wouldn't use but before that unless we're joining two independent clauses. So John and Eric were supposed to be at the party 2 hours ago, one independent clause, comma, but their car had a flat tire. That is two independent clauses. There's no subordinate clauses, right? We didn't get those subordinate signal words to look for. Okay. Now this one gets tricky, right? So which of the following choices is a complete sentence? So this is those, we are basically using a verb as your subject, right? So running or visiting unsecure websites, which you should avoid whenever possible. Not enough information there. Running a virus detector is the best way to keep malware off your computer. Sounds like a whole sentence. Checking to see if the site is secure by looking for a tiny lock icon on this left side of the address bar. Who is doing that? Checking to see if the site is secure by looking for a tiny lock icon on the left side of the address bar. That doesn't sound right. Avoiding websites that use pushy sales tactics or try to scare you into signing up for their services. Nope. So yeah, running a virus detector. That's the correct way to use a verb as a subject. Running a virus detector is the best way to keep malware off your computer. Okay. A few more here. All right, yeah, Sam and Diane were hired on the same day. In addition, they were scheduled for the same start date. So we know right away that's not how you're going to combine two sentences, right? Or combine a subordinate clause with the independent clause. That is incorrect. In addition does not stand alone like that. So we found what we need to change. Now, how do we do it? So here, basically, we remove in addition, right? We're just going to remove that and we're going to say, and they were scheduled for the same start date. The other ones do, well, let's see. Sam and Diane, that first choice doesn't deal with the with, the part that we need to change. And, because that's a conjunction we don't want to use there, we're not going to use a subordinate word like that. Change day, comma, in addition to day furthermore. That's not correcting anything. That's just making a new problem. And then still using in addition as a problem without any type of punctuation. What we want is a conjunction there. So and is the right way to go. So change day, comma, in addition, comma, to they, to day and. All right, 7. So the correction we need to make here, some words in English are difficult to rhyme, such as orange, month, purple, and wolf. So that second sentence is not a sentence, right? It's a subordinate clause. We know that because such as, which we saw in our subordinating conjunctions there. So such as orange, month, purple, and wolf, we need to combine with our independent clause there. That complete sentence, some words in English are difficult to rhyme. So how are we going to do that? We do that by adding a comma. Yeah, change rhyme period such as to rhyme comma such as. Here we go. Last one. So following choice is a run-on sentence. So the window is broken. Remember I told you, semicolon, however, comma, the shutters are closed. Complete sentence, not a run-on, not a fragment. The people left the train car and began moving toward the station exit. Not a run-on, complete sentence, no punctuation needed there. We're good. Both teams hope to win the pie eating contest at noon and the sack race at 2, right? That and it's not joining two independent clauses, it's adding information, right? Same thing with the people left the train car. So all those are right, not run-ons. And stacked several logs in the fireplace, then started a fire, right? We need a conjunction there after that comma to make that, to join two independent clauses. All right, so there's our answers. Okay, so fragments, best thing you can do, look, does it make sense? Does it stand alone? Is it telling you all the information? Look for signal words, look for conjunctions and things like that. Run-ons get a little trickier, but it's all about, do you have the right type of conjunction joining two independent clauses? That's where run-ons happen, right? A comma splice means there's just a comma, there's no actual conjunction there. Few sentences are when you have two independent clauses with no punctuation or conjunction. So those are things to look out for. Any questions on run-on sentence or sentence fragments today? Okay, I will take that as a no. So let's wrap up for today, and we'll hit up social studies at 12:15 tomorrow. Okay. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Y'all have a good afternoon.